The gunshot shattered the silence of the Montana foothills as Fiona Murphy aimed her father's revolver at the cloud of dust advancing toward the family homestead. Her hands trembled despite her fierce determination, sweat beading along her brow in the summer heat of 1876. 6 riders approached, their intentions clear from the rifles glinting in the sun. They'd come for the land, just as her dying father had warned they would. "That's far enough," she shouted across the yard, her voice stronger than she felt. Behind her stood the modest cabin her father had built with his own hands, the home she had sworn to protect with her last breath if necessary. The men slowed their horses, spreading out in a half-circle before her. Their leader, a man with a cruel smile beneath a dust-covered hat, laughed openly at the sight of her. "Look here, boys. Old Murphy left his little girl to face us." He spat a stream of tobacco juice onto the dry ground. "Miss, you best pack your things. This land belongs to the railroad now." Fiona's green eyes narrowed as she kept the revolver trained on him. "My father's deed says different. This is Murphy land, fair and square." "Your pa's dead," another rider called out. "And that piece of paper won't stop a bullet." "Neither will yours," Fiona replied, though her heart hammered against her ribs. She was alone, truly alone, with her father freshly buried on the hill behind the cabin and her nearest neighbors miles away. The leader's amusement faded. "You're outnumbered, lady. 6 guns against 1. Be reasonable." A sudden movement from the tree line caught Fiona's attention, though she dared not look directly. A rider emerged from the shadows, moving with unhurried confidence. The stranger's horse, a magnificent black stallion, made barely a sound as it approached. Actually, a deep voice called out, "She's not alone." The 6 men turned, hands instinctively moving to their holsters. The newcomer sat tall in his saddle, a worn leather duster hanging from broad shoulders. His face was partially obscured by the shadow of his hat, but Fiona could see he was young, perhaps 30, with a weathered face that spoke of years under the harsh western sun. "This ain't your fight, mister," the leader warned. The stranger dismounted with fluid grace, his spurs jingling softly as his boots hit the ground. He walked forward, positioning himself beside Fiona. Only then did she notice the twin Colts holstered at his hips and the badge pinned to his vest. "Name's Nathan Blackwood," he said, his voice carrying across the yard without him raising it. "U.S. Marshal." His eyes, blue as a mountain lake, briefly met Fiona's before returning to the men. "And I believe the lady asked you to leave her property." The leader shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. "We got papers from the railroad. I don't see a judge's signature," Nathan interrupted. "Just 6 men harassing a woman on her own land." His hand rested casually near his holster. "Now, the lady says you're not welcome. That makes you trespassers." "You're still outnumbered," the leader challenged, regaining some confidence as he looked at his companions. A hint of a smile touched the marshal's lips. "I've been outnumbered before." Something in his tone made 2 of the riders exchange nervous glances. Fiona could sense the change in the air. The calm certainty radiating from the marshal beside her was having its effect. 6-2 ain't good odds," one of the men muttered. "Depends on which 2, Nathan replied evenly. For a long moment no one moved. Fiona kept her revolver steady, drawing strength from the marshal's presence. Finally, the leader jerked his head in a reluctant signal. "We'll be back," he warned, wheeling his horse around. "With proper papers. Make sure they're legal," Nathan called after them. "Or don't bother coming back at all." They watched as the 6 riders departed, dust clouds rising behind them. Only when they were specks on the horizon did Fiona lower her weapon, her arms suddenly heavy with the release of tension. "They will come back," she said, turning to face her unexpected ally. "With more men next time." Nathan Blackwood removed his hat, revealing a shock of dark hair streaked with early silver at the temples. His face was all angles and planes, with a scar running along his jawline. Probably, he agreed, studying her with an appraising gaze. But by then, we'll be ready. He extended his hand. I don't believe I caught your name, madam. Fiona Murphy. She took his hand, surprised by the gentleness of his grip despite the calluses that spoke of a life of hard work and harder fighting. And I don't recall asking for federal assistance, Marshal Blackwood. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. No, you didn't. I was tracking a fugitive through these parts when I heard the shot. He glanced at the revolver still in her hand. Nice warning shot, by the way. It wasn't a warning, Fiona admitted. I missed. Nathan's laugh was unexpected, a deep, genuine sound that softened the hard lines of his face. Well, Miss Murphy, if you're going to defend this place, we might need to work on your aim. Fiona found herself smiling despite everything. My father always said I was better with words than weapons. The mention of her father brought reality crashing back, and her smile faded. He died 3 days ago. Pneumonia. Nathan's expression sobered. I'm sorry for your loss. He looked toward the cabin, then back to the horizon where the riders had disappeared. Do you have family nearby?
No.
It was just Pa and me since Ma died when I was 12. Fiona squared her shoulders. But I can manage. I've been running this place alongside him for years. I don't doubt your capability, Miss Murphy. But those men weren't bluffing. The railroad wants this land, and they'll send more than threats next time. Then I'll face them when they come. Fiona lifted her chin, defiance flashing in her eyes. Nathan studied her for a long moment, respect evident in his gaze. I believe you would. He settled his hat back on his head. But if you don't mind some company until then, I'd like to make camp nearby. My fugitive seems to have moved on, and I could use a day or two to rest my horse before continuing the hunt. Fiona knew she should refuse. A woman alone with a stranger, even a marshal, would set tongues wagging if anyone found out. But the thought of facing those men alone again made her hesitate. There's a barn, she said finally. You and your horse are welcome to it. In exchange for some shooting lessons, perhaps. Nathan's smile returned, warming his eyes. That seems like a fair trade, Miss Murphy. Fiona, she corrected him. If you're going to help me defend my home, you might as well use my name. Fiona, he repeated, and something in the way he said it made her heart skip. And you can call me Nathan. As they walked toward the cabin, Fiona couldn't shake the feeling that her life had just taken an unexpected turn. Whether for better or worse remained to be seen, but for the first time since her father's death, she didn't feel entirely alone. Nathan insisted on checking the perimeter of the property before settling in for the night. Fiona watched from the porch as he methodically inspected the approaches to the cabin, noting vantage points and vulnerabilities with the practiced eye of a man who had seen his share of trouble. Your father chose well, he commented as he returned, the setting sun casting long shadows across the yard. Defensible position, good sight lines, close to water. He was a surveyor before we came west, Fiona explained, pouring a cup of coffee and handing it to him. Said he'd looked at enough land to know what made a good homestead. Nathan accepted the coffee with a nod of thanks.
Smart man.
This is prime grazing land, too. I can see why the railroad wants it. They've been trying to buy out everyone in the valley. Fiona leaned against the porch railing, gazing out at the land she loved. The rolling hills were bathed in golden light, the creek that bordered the eastern edge of their property glinting like silver thread. Most folks sold. Can't blame them, the money was good. But Pa refused. Why? Nathan asked, his voice soft in the evening quiet. Fiona smiled sadly. He promised my mother this would be our forever home. Said no amount of money could buy that promise back. Nathan nodded, understanding in his eyes. Some things aren't for sale. The railroad doesn't see it that way. Fiona tucked a strand of auburn hair behind her ear. Those men today, they weren't the first to come. Just the first to come after Pa died. They were watching, Nathan concluded, waiting for their opportunity, like vultures. Fiona's voice hardened. I buried him on the hill yesterday. They didn't even wait for the dirt to settle. The marshal's jaw tightened. That's not right. Not much is right about how things work out here, Fiona replied. I've learned that much. They fell into companionable silence as darkness claimed the land. Stars emerged overhead, brilliant and countless in a way they never seemed in the cities back east. Fiona had come to love these Montana nights, the vastness of the sky making her feel both insignificant and infinitely free. You should get some rest, Nathan said eventually, setting down his empty cup. I'll take first watch. You don't have to, I do, he interrupted gently. Those men might decide to return under cover of darkness. Best to be prepared. Fiona wanted to argue, but found she couldn't. The events of the day, coming so soon after her father's death, had left her bone-weary. Wake me in a few hours. I'll take a turn. Nathan's expression suggested he had no intention of doing so, but he nodded. Go on. I'll be fine out here. Reluctantly, Fiona retreated inside the cabin. Through the window, she watched as Nathan settled into a chair on the porch, his profile etched in silver moonlight. With his hat tipped low and his hand resting near his holster, he looked like he belonged there, a sentinel guarding against the darkness. For the first time in days, Fiona slept without fear. Morning brought with it the rich aroma of coffee and bacon. Fiona woke disoriented, sunlight streaming through her window. She'd slept through the night. Nathan had never woken her for her watch. Quickly dressing, she hurried into the main room to find the marshal tending to breakfast on the cast iron stove. You let me sleep, she accused, though there was little heat in her words. Nathan glanced up, amusement dancing in his eyes. You needed it. So did you. I've gone longer without sleep. He gestured to the table, already set with plates and cutlery. Breakfast is almost ready. Hope you don't mind me making myself at home. Not at all. Fiona moved to help, struck by the domestic scene they created together. Did you see anything during the night? Nothing worth mentioning. A coyote came to investigate around midnight. Left disappointed. Nathan slid bacon onto their plates with practiced ease. After breakfast, I thought we might start those shooting lessons we discussed. Eager to see how bad I really am? Fiona asked, raising an eyebrow. Eager to make sure you can protect yourself when I'm not around, he corrected, his expression serious once more. The thought of his departure brought an unexpected pang. How long do you plan to stay? Nathan hesitated, serving eggs alongside the bacon. A few days, at least. Need to make sure those men don't return. After that. He shrugged. Duty calls. My fugitive won't catch himself. Of course. Fiona sat down, suddenly very interested in arranging her napkin. I appreciate whatever time you can spare. They ate in silence for a few minutes, the simple food tasting better than anything Fiona had managed to prepare for herself since her father fell ill. This fugitive, she said finally. Is he dangerous? Nathan's expression darkened. Very. Robbed 3 stagecoaches in Wyoming territory. Killed 2 guards and a passenger. Been tracking him for nearly 2 months. And you think he came this way? I did. Now, I'm not so sure. Nathan leaned back, studying her. But that's my problem, not yours. Fiona wanted to ask more, but sensed his reluctance to discuss it further. Instead, she changed the subject. Tell me about these shooting lessons. After breakfast, they moved to a clearing behind the barn. Nathan set up targets, empty cans and bottles arranged on a fallen log, and began assessing Fiona's abilities with her father's revolver. Your stance is wrong, he said after watching her miss 3 shots in a row. Setting his own weapon aside, he moved behind her. May I? Fiona nodded, suddenly very aware of his proximity as his hands gently adjusted her arms and shoulders. Feet wider apart, he instructed, his voice close to her ear. Gives you better balance. His boot nudged her feet into position. Fiona tried to focus on his instructions rather than the warmth of him at her back. Now, take a deep breath, Nathan continued. Exhale slowly as you squeeze, don't pull the trigger. Fiona did as instructed. The can at the end of the log flew off with a satisfying ping. I hit it, she exclaimed, turning to face him with a delighted smile. Nathan was closer than she'd realized. For a moment, they stood mere inches apart, his blue eyes fixed on hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. Something passed between them, a current of awareness neither had expected. He stepped back first, clearing his throat. Good shot. Now do it again, without my help this time. For the next 2 hours, Nathan patiently corrected Fiona's technique, offering praise when she succeeded and encouragement when she failed. By mid-morning, she was hitting targets with reasonable consistency, her confidence growing with each successful shot. You're a natural, Nathan commented as they collected the battered cans. Just needed some proper instruction. I had a good teacher. Fiona smiled, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The morning sun had brought a flush to her cheeks, and for the first time since her father's illness, she felt truly alive. Is that how you learned? Someone teach you? A shadow crossed Nathan's face. My father taught me. He was the marshal in our town back in Nebraska. Was? Fiona asked gently. He was killed when I was 16. Nathan's voice was matter-of-fact, but Fiona caught the old pain beneath it. Shot by a cattle rustler he was bringing in. I'm sorry. It was a long time ago. Nathan holstered his weapon with practiced ease. Made me decide to follow in his footsteps, though. Figured the law could use men who understood what it cost to uphold it. Before Fiona could respond, the sound of an approaching horse drew their attention. They turned to see a rider coming fast down the road toward the cabin. Nathan's hand moved instinctively to his holster. Get behind me. I know him, Fiona said, recognizing the rider. It's Thomas Reed from the next valley over. He brings our mail when he goes to town. They walked to meet the rider as he pulled his lathered horse to a stop in the yard. Thomas Reed was a rancher in his 50s, with a weather-beaten face and honest eyes. Today, those eyes were troubled. Miss Murphy, he greeted, tipping his hat. His gaze shifted suspiciously to Nathan. Didn't know you had company. This is Marshal Blackwood, Fiona introduced. He's been kind enough to help me since Pa died. Reed's expression softened. Sorry about your pa, Mississippi. He was a good man. Thank you, Mr. Reed. What brings you out this way? The rancher dismounted, handing over a small packet of letters. These came for your pa. Also. He hesitated, glancing again at Nathan. Thought you should know there's talk in town. Railroad men at the saloon, hiring guns. Heard them say something about clearing out the last of the holdouts. Fiona felt a chill despite the warm morning sun. When was this? Yesterday. Reed shifted uncomfortably. Would have come sooner, but my wife's been poorly. Figured you ought to know. Being out here alone and all. Not alone anymore, Nathan stated, his voice carrying a quiet authority that made Reed stand a little straighter. Glad to hear it, Marshal. The rancher seemed relieved. Those railroad men, they don't care much for the law when it gets in their way. Neither do I, Nathan replied evenly, when it's the wrong people writing it. Reed nodded, understanding the implicit promise in the marshal's words. Well, I best be getting back. My Eliza will be wondering where I've got to. He remounted his horse, then paused, looking directly at Fiona. Your pa stood his ground when others sold out. Folks respect that, Miss Murphy. You need help, you send word. Thank you, Mr. Reed, Fiona said, touched by the offer. Please give my best to Mrs. Reed. They watched as the rancher rode away, dust billowing behind him. When he was out of sight, Fiona turned to Nathan, the letters clutched in her hand. Hired guns, she said softly. They're not even pretending anymore. Nathan's expression was grim.
No.
They're not. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Fiona, there be no shame in selling. Starting fresh somewhere else. This is my home. Her voice was quiet but unyielding. I won't be driven from it by men who see only dollar signs where I see memories. For a long moment, Nathan studied her face, searching for something in her eyes. Whatever he found there seemed to satisfy him. Then we better prepare, he said finally. They won't wait long. As they walked back to the cabin, Fiona was aware of the weight of her decision. She might be risking her life for this land, but looking around at the home her parents had built, she knew she couldn't bear to lose it. What she didn't want to examine too closely was how much the word "we" from Nathan's lips had steadied her resolve. The next 2 days fell into a rhythm that felt strangely comfortable despite the looming threat. By day, Nathan taught Fiona more than just shooting. He showed her how to use the terrain to her advantage, which approaches to the cabin were most vulnerable, and how to create defensive positions throughout the property. In return, Fiona cooked meals that were a vast improvement over the trail fare Nathan was accustomed to, and in the evenings, they sat on the porch talking as the sun set over the mountains. She learned he'd been a marshal for 8 years, that he had a younger sister back in Nebraska who wrote him monthly letters, and that he'd never stayed in one place long enough to call it home. "Don't you miss having roots?" she asked on the second night, as they shared the last of her father's whiskey. Nathan considered the question, the amber liquid glinting in his glass as he turned it. "Never thought much about it. The job keeps me moving." "That's not an answer," Fiona observed. A smile tugged at his lips. "No, it's not." He took a sip before continuing. "Truth is, I've seen what happens when a man in my position puts down roots. My father did. Made him vulnerable. But it also gave him something worth protecting," Fiona countered gently. Nathan's eyes met hers in the gathering darkness.
Yes.
It did. There was something unspoken in his gaze, something that made Fiona's heart beat faster. "What about you? Ever think about leaving? Seeing what's beyond these mountains?" "Sometimes," she admitted. "When I was younger, I dreamed of going to San Francisco. Or maybe even back east to Boston or New York. Somewhere with libraries and theaters and streets full of people." "What stopped you?" Fiona looked out at the land stretching before them, silvered by moonlight. "Nothing stopped me. I chose this. After Ma died, Pa needed me. And somewhere along the way, I realized I needed this place too." She gestured to the vista before them. The freedom of it, the quiet. Even the hardship has its purpose, makes you appreciate the good days more. Nathan nodded, understanding in his eyes. Not many would see it that way. "No," Fiona agreed. "Most people look at land like this and see only what it lacks. They don't see what it gives." They fell silent, the night sounds enveloping them, cicadas chirping, the distant howl of a coyote, the soft whisper of wind through prairie grass. It was a companionable silence, comfortable in a way that surprised them both. "We should turn in," Nathan said eventually, setting aside his empty glass. "Early start tomorrow. I want to check the North Ridge, make sure we haven't missed any approaches." Fiona nodded, rising from her chair. At the door, she paused, looking back at him. "Nathan? Thank you. Not just for the help, but for understanding why it matters." In the moonlight, his smile was gentle. "Get some sleep, Fiona." Inside, as she prepared for bed, Fiona found herself thinking about the man on her porch. There was something about Nathan Blackwood that called to her a steadiness, a quiet strength that matched her own determination. It was dangerous thinking, she knew. He would leave soon, return to his life of tracking fugitives across the territories. She had no place in that life, just as he had no place in hers. Yet as she drifted off to sleep, it was his blue eyes she saw, steady and sure as the Montana sky. Dawn broke clear and cold the following morning. Fiona woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Nathan's voice, low and urgent, speaking to someone in the yard. Quickly dressing, she hurried outside to find him conversing with a young boy on a pinto pony. "What's happening?" she asked, joining them. Nathan's expression was grim. "This is Jimmy Wells from the Hayward Ranch. He's brought news." The boy, no more than 12, twisted his hat nervously in his hands. "Pa sent me, Miss Murphy. Said to tell you they're coming." 8 riders left town at first light, heading this way. Railroad men and some hired guns. Fiona felt her stomach tighten. "How long?" "They'll be here by noon," Nathan answered for the boy. "Jimmy, you tell your pa we're grateful for the warning. Now get on home, and stay there until this is settled." The boy nodded solemnly. "Pa said if you need help, this isn't his fight," Nathan cut in gently. "Or yours. Go on now." They watched as Jimmy galloped away, the urgency of his mission evident in his posture. 8 men, Fiona said quietly when the boy was out of sight. "Plus the 6 from before, if they join up." Nathan turned to her, his expression grave. "Fiona, this is your last chance to leave. We could pack what matters most and be gone before they arrive." For a moment, Fiona was tempted. The odds were overwhelming, the danger real. But then she looked at the cabin, at the graves on the hill where both her parents now rested, at the land that had sustained them. "No," she said firmly.
"I'm stay."
Nathan studied her face, then nodded once. "I figured you'd say that."
"Come on, then."
"We've got work to do." The next few hours passed in a flurry of activity. They barricaded windows, stockpiled ammunition at strategic points throughout the cabin and barn, and filled every available container with water in case they found themselves under siege. Nathan disappeared briefly to position his horse in a hidden ravine behind the property, just in case, he explained, though neither wanted to consider what that case might be. By mid-morning, they were as prepared as they could be. Fiona stood in the yard, her father's rifle in her hands, surveying their work. "Will it be enough?" she asked as Nathan joined her. "It'll have to be." He checked his revolvers one last time, ensuring they were fully loaded. "Fiona, when they come, I need you to let me do the talking." She bristled slightly. "This is my land, my fight." "And my badge," he countered, tapping the star on his chest. "These men might not respect much, but a federal marshal still carries weight. If there's a chance to end this without bloodshed, we need to take it." Reluctantly, Fiona nodded. "But if they don't listen?" Nathan's eyes met hers, serious and steady. "Then we do what we must." The sun climbed higher in the sky, the waiting stretching their nerves taut. They ate a simple lunch of bread and jerky, neither particularly hungry, but knowing they needed the strength. Afterward, they positioned themselves on the porch, the best vantage point to see the approaching riders. "Tell me about San Francisco," Nathan said suddenly, breaking the tense silence. Fiona glanced at him, surprised. "What? You said you dreamed of going there."
"Tell me about it."
"What would you do there?" Understanding dawned, he was trying to distract her from the approaching confrontation. Grateful for the gesture, Fiona played along. "I'd visit the bay first," she said, a small smile playing on her lips. "I've never seen the ocean. Pa described it once, said it was like the prairie, but always moving, always changing. Then I'd find a bookshop. Spend hours there, just browsing. Maybe buy a novel I've never heard of." "What else?" Nathan encouraged, his own expression softening as he watched her. "I'd wear a fine dress," Fiona continued, warming to the fantasy. "Something impractical and beautiful. Go to a restaurant where they serve food I can't pronounce. Perhaps attend the theater, a Shakespearean play or an opera." "You'd look beautiful," Nathan said quietly, "in that impractical dress." Their eyes met, and for a moment, the looming threat faded away. There was only a man and a woman, sitting on a porch, imagining possibilities that seemed both impossible and tantalizingly close. The moment shattered with the distant sound of hoofbeats. "They're here," Nathan said, rising to his feet. Fiona stood beside him, rifle ready but held casually at her side as Nathan had instructed. Together, they watched as the riders appeared on the horizon, a cloud of dust marking their approach. "Remember," Nathan murmured. "Let me talk first." The riders slowed as they neared the homestead, spreading out in a semicircle before the cabin. Fiona counted 11 men, the 6 from before plus 5 new faces, all armed, all carrying the hard look of men who solved problems with violence. Their leader, the same man who had confronted Fiona days earlier, urged his horse forward a few paces. His eyes narrowed when he spotted Nathan. Well, the marshal's still hanging around. His gaze shifted to Fiona. "Miss Murphy, we're here on official railroad business." "Federal law supersedes railroad business," Nathan replied evenly. "Unless you've got a signed court order, you're trespassing on private property." The leader smiled, an expression devoid of warmth. "As it happens, we do have papers this time." He reached into his jacket, producing a folded document. "Judge Simmons signed it yesterday. This land has been condemned for the public good. The railroad's expansion takes priority over a single homesteader." Nathan didn't move to take the paper. "Judge Simmons doesn't have jurisdiction here. This is federal territory." "Details," the man dismissed with a wave of his hand. "The railroad will sort it out with the proper authorities afterward." "I am the proper authority," Nathan stated, his voice hardening. "And I say those papers aren't worth the ink wasted on them." A tense silence followed. Fiona could feel the hostility emanating from the mounted men, could see fingers twitching near triggers. "Last chance, Miss Murphy," the leader called. "Take what you can carry and leave. The railroad's offering fair compensation." "This land isn't for sale," Fiona replied, her voice carrying across the yard. "Not now, not ever." The leader sighed dramatically. "Then I'm afraid we'll have to remove you." His eyes flicked to Nathan. "Both of you. You're outnumbered," one of the new men called out, a tall figure with a pockmarked face and cold eyes. "Don't be fools." Nathan's stance didn't change, but Fiona felt him shift slightly, positioning himself partially in front of her. "I've been outnumbered before," he replied calmly. "Didn't end well for the other side." The leader's patience visibly thinned. "Enough talk. Marshal, step aside. This doesn't concern you. I'm making it my concern. Then you'll die alongside her." The leader's hand moved toward his holster. What happened next unfolded with startling swiftness. Nathan's draw was a blur, his first shot hitting the leader's gun hand before the man could clear leather. The wounded man howled, his revolver dropping to the dirt as he clutched his bleeding hand to his chest. "Next one goes somewhere more permanent," Nathan warned, his voice deadly calm. "Unless you all turn around right now." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then one of the riders, a nervous-looking young man barely out of his teens, broke, wheeling his horse around and galloping away. His departure seemed to break the spell. Two more followed quickly, clearly having second thoughts about dying for the railroad's expansion plans. The remaining men, however, held their ground, spreading out further to present more difficult targets. 8 against 2, the pockmarked man called, assuming leadership with the original leader still nursing his wounded hand. "Those odds still favor us." Fiona raised her rifle, sighting down the barrel at the speaker. 7, she corrected as she squeezed the trigger. The shot went wide, kicking up dirt near the man's horse, but it served its purpose. The animal reared in panic, throwing its rider before bolting. The fallen man scrambled to his feet, only to find himself facing Nathan's unwavering aim. "I suggest you start walking," the marshal advised. "Town's about 15 miles that way." With a curse, the man began trudging toward the road, casting murderous glances over his shoulder. 6 remained, including the wounded leader. They had spread into a loose formation, using their horses for partial cover. Nathan and Fiona stood exposed on the porch, a tactically vulnerable position. Inside, Nathan murmured, "On my signal." Before he could give it, gunfire erupted from the remaining riders. Bullets splintered the porch railing and thudded into the cabin walls. Nathan shoved Fiona through the doorway, returning fire as he followed her in. "The windows," he directed, moving to take position at one while Fiona manned another. Outside, the riders had dismounted and were advancing cautiously, using whatever cover they could find. Two headed toward the barn, clearly intending to flank the cabin. "They're splitting up," Fiona warned, tracking them through her window. Nathan nodded grimly. "I see them. Hold your position. Don't fire unless you have a clear shot." For the next hour, an intermittent exchange of gunfire kept both sides pinned down. The railroad men were hesitant to rush the cabin, aware of the marshal's deadly accuracy, while Nathan and Fiona were constrained by their limited ammunition and disadvantageous position. As the sun began its westward descent, casting long shadows across the yard, Fiona noticed movement near the creek. "Nathan," she called softly, "they're trying to circle behind us." He joined her at her window, squinting to see through the gathering dusk. "3 of them. They'll try to set fire to the cabin after dark." "What do we do?" Nathan checked his ammunition. "I'll go out the back, circle around behind them. You stay here, keep the others occupied." Fear clutched at Fiona's heart. "That's too dangerous. They'll see you." "Not if I'm careful." His eyes met hers, steady and reassuring. "Trust me, Fiona. I've done this before." She wanted to argue, to keep him from risking his life, but she knew he was right. If the men reached the back of the cabin uncontested, they'd be trapped. "Be careful," she whispered. Nathan's hand briefly covered hers, a fleeting touch that conveyed more than words could. Then he was moving toward the back door, checking his revolvers one last time. "Fire a few shots every minute or so," he instructed. "Make them think we're both still inside." "And Fiona," he paused at the door, his expression intense, "if I don't come back, there's a trap door under the rug in the root cellar. Leads to a tunnel my horse is waiting at the end of it. Use it." Before she could respond, he slipped outside, disappearing into the growing darkness. Alone in the cabin, Fiona divided her attention between the windows, watching for any movement from the men in the yard while straining to hear what might be happening behind the house. As instructed, she fired occasional shots, conserving her ammunition while maintaining the illusion that both defenders remained inside. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. The silence from the back of the property was unnerving. No gunshots, no shouts, nothing to indicate what was happening. Had Nathan succeeded? Or had he been ambushed, perhaps lying wounded or worse in the gathering darkness? The thought brought a surge of emotion that surprised her with its intensity. In just a few days, the Marshal had become important to her in ways she hadn't anticipated. The possibility of losing him now was unexpectedly devastating. A sudden commotion from the creek drew her attention. Gunfire, 3 shots in rapid succession, followed by shouting. Then silence again. Fiona held her breath, watching the back door, praying to see Nathan's tall figure return. When minutes passed with no sign of him, dread settled in her stomach like a stone. More movement in the yard caught her eye. The remaining men were regrouping, conferring in low voices. Something in their demeanor had changed. They seemed less certain, casting frequent glances toward the creek. The back door opened quietly, and Fiona whirled, rifle raised. "It's me," Nathan's voice called softly before she could fire. Relief flooded through her as he stepped inside. There was blood on his shirt, a dark stain spreading across his left shoulder. "You're hurt," she gasped, moving toward him. "Just a graze," he assured her, though his grimace as he moved suggested otherwise. "The 3 by the creek won't be joining the party. 2 ran. One's not running anywhere ever again." Fiona guided him to a chair, already reaching for clean cloths to tend his wound. How many does that leave? 3, including the leader. Nathan winced as she helped him remove his shirt, revealing a nasty bullet furrow across his shoulder. They're discussing their options out there. Not liking the way this is going. Fiona cleaned the wound with whiskey, her touch gentle despite the urgency of their situation. The odds are better now. Nathan managed a tight smile. That they are. As Fiona bandaged his shoulder, a voice called from outside. Marshal, let's talk this through. Nathan exchanged a glance with Fiona. The leader. Sounds like he's having second thoughts. Could be a trick, Fiona warned. Could be. Nathan stood carefully, testing his injured arm. Only one way to find out. Moving to the window, he called back. I'm listening. This has gone too far, the voice replied. Men dead over a piece of land. The railroad doesn't want more bloodshed. Should have thought of that before you brought guns to threaten a woman on her own property, Nathan countered. There was a pause before the response came. We're leaving. But this isn't over, Marshal. The railroad gets what it wants, one way or another. Not this time, Nathan replied firmly. Miss Murphy keeps her land. The railroad finds another route. That's the only deal on the table. Another silence, longer this time. Finally, we'll take your terms to our employers. But don't consider this settled. Nathan and Fiona watched from the window as the 3 remaining men mounted their horses and rode away, the wounded leader cradling his injured hand, his posture radiating defeat and resentment. Only when they were specks on the horizon did Nathan allow himself to slump against the wall, fatigue and pain etching lines in his face. You need to rest, Fiona said, supporting him as he made his way to a chair. That shoulder needs proper tending. We need to stay alert, Nathan argued weakly. They might come back. Not tonight, Fiona stated confidently. They've lost too many men. They'll regroup, report to their superiors. We have time. Nathan didn't fight her as she helped him to her father's bed. The blood loss and exertion had taken their toll, and despite his intentions to remain vigilant, he was asleep almost as soon as his head touched the pillow. Fiona kept watch through the night, moving between windows with her rifle ready, but no further threats materialized. By dawn, she was convinced the immediate danger had passed. As the first light of morning filtered through the windows, she allowed herself to truly look at the sleeping man who had risked his life for her and her land. In repose, the hard lines of his face softened, making him appear younger, more vulnerable. The silver at his temples caught the early light, gleaming against the darker strands. Something shifted in Fiona's heart as she watched him. This man, this stranger, who had appeared when she needed him most, had become something more than an ally. The realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. Nathan stirred, his eyes opening to find her watching him. For a moment, neither spoke, something unspoken passing between them in the quiet dawn light. You're still here, he murmured finally. Fiona smiled softly. So are you. In the days that followed, they fell into a new rhythm. Nathan's shoulder healed slowly, requiring him to extend his stay beyond what either had initially expected. Each day that passed without word from the railroad men was a victory, though both knew the reprieve might be temporary. Word spread through the nearby homesteads about the standoff. Neighbors who had kept their distance during Fiona's father's illness now appeared at the cabin, offering support, supplies, and in some cases, armed assistance should the railroad men return. You've become something of a symbol, Nathan commented one evening as they sat on the porch after another visitor had departed. The last holdout against the railroad's expansion. Fiona shook her head, embarrassed by the attention. I just wanted to keep my home. Sometimes that's all it takes to inspire others, Nathan replied, standing your ground when it would be easier to run. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the chorus of night insects and the occasional distant coyote call. Nathan's shoulder was healing well, the bandages now smaller, his movements less restricted. Soon, Fiona knew, he would leave to resume his pursuit of the fugitive who had brought him to her doorstep in the first place. The thought brought an ache she tried not to examine too closely. "I received a telegram today," Nathan said suddenly. Thomas Reed brought it when he delivered the mail. Fiona's heart sank. "About your fugitive?" Nathan nodded. "He was captured in Idaho Territory. Another marshal got him. So you're free to continue on your way," Fiona said carefully, keeping her voice neutral despite the hollow feeling spreading through her chest. "I am." Nathan turned to look at her, his expression unreadable in the fading light. "I've been thinking about what comes next." "Oh." Fiona couldn't bring herself to ask directly if he was leaving, when he would go. "This territory needs a permanent marshal's presence," he said slowly. "Too many disputes like yours, too many opportunities for those with money and power to bend the law to their will." Fiona nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "I've requested a permanent posting here," Nathan continued. "Established a proper office, enforce federal law throughout the region." Hope flickered to life in Fiona's heart. "Here? In Montana Territory? Right here in this valley if the request is approved?" Nathan's eyes held hers. "Unless you think that would be too close." "Too close?" Fiona echoed, confused. Nathan shifted in his chair, an uncharacteristic uncertainty in his movements. "To your homestead."
To you.
Understanding dawned, bringing with it a rush of warmth. "I don't think that would be too close at all," she said softly. The silence that followed was charged with possibility. Nathan reached across the space between their chairs, his hand finding hers in the gathering darkness. "Fiona," he began, his voice deeper than usual. "These past weeks, a rider appeared suddenly on the road, approaching at speed." Nathan was on his feet instantly, hand moving to his holster before he recognized the horse and rider. "It's Thomas Reed again," he said, relaxing slightly though his expression remained alert. The rancher pulled up before the porch, his usually composed demeanor visibly agitated. "Marshal, Miss Murphy, glad to find you both here. News from town." "What is it, Mr. Reed?" Fiona asked, apprehension returning. "Railroads pulled out," Reed announced, a smile breaking across his weathered face. "Packed up their office, recalled their surveyors. Word is they're rerouting the line north, through the Blackfoot Valley instead." Fiona stared in disbelief. "They're giving up? Just like that?" Reed shook his head. "Not just like that. Seems your stand here caused quite a stir. Newspapers in Helena got hold of the story. Brave homesteader woman and lone marshal defy railroad barons. Governor himself took notice. Made it clear to the railroad that forcibly removing legitimate landowners wouldn't be tolerated in Montana Territory." Nathan's hand found Fiona's shoulder, steady and reassuring. "So it's over?" "Looks that way," Reed confirmed. "Thought you'd want to know right away. The whole valley's celebrating tonight. You two should join us at my place. Eliza's organizing a proper shindig." Fiona was too overwhelmed to respond immediately. After weeks of tension, of preparing for another confrontation, the sudden resolution seemed almost unreal. "We'll be there," Nathan answered for both of them. "Thank you for bringing the news, Thomas." After Reed departed, Fiona remained on the porch, trying to process what had happened. "I can hardly believe it," she murmured. "All this time preparing for another fight, and it ends with a newspaper article and the governor's intervention. Sometimes the best victories are the ones where no shots are fired," Nathan observed, coming to stand beside her at the railing. "We won," Fiona said, the reality finally sinking in. "We actually won." "You won," Nathan corrected gently. "This was always your fight, Fiona. I just helped even the odds a bit." She turned to face him fully. "You did more than that. Without you, I'd have lost everything." In the silver moonlight, his eyes were impossibly blue, focused entirely on her. "I got something out of it too," he said quietly. "Your shoulder wound? Fiona teased, though her heart was suddenly racing. Nathan smiled, the expression transforming his serious face. "A reason to stay," he said simply. He moved closer, one hand coming up to brush a strand of hair from her face with a gentleness that belied his strength. "If you'll have me," he added, uncertainty flickering briefly across his features. Fiona's answer was to close the distance between them, rising on tiptoe to press her lips to his. Nathan responded immediately, his arms encircling her waist, drawing her against him as the kiss deepened. When they finally separated, both slightly breathless, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "I take it that's a yes?" Fiona laughed, a sound of pure joy. "That's a yes, Marshal Blackwood." Later that night, as they danced under the stars at the Reed Ranch, surrounded by neighbors who had become allies and friends, Fiona reflected on how much had changed in such a short time. What had begun with a warning shot and a desperate stand against overwhelming odds had transformed into something she had never expected to find on her remote Montana homestead: love, partnership, and a future brighter than she had dared to imagine. As Nathan led her away from the celebration for a moment of privacy, his hand warm and steady in hers, Fiona knew with certainty that some battles were worth fighting, no matter the odds. "What are you thinking?" Nathan asked, noticing her contemplative expression. Fiona smiled up at him, her heart full. "I'm thinking about what you said that first day. About being outnumbered." Nathan's arm tightened around her waist. "I meant it. I've faced worse odds." "I believe you," Fiona replied softly. "But I'm glad we faced these ones together." Under the vast Montana sky, with the sounds of celebration floating on the night breeze, Nathan lowered his head to kiss her once more. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions about their future together. But tonight, in this moment, they had everything they needed: each other, the land they had defended, and the promise of all the days to come. 5 years later, Fiona stood on the porch of the expanded cabin, watching as Nathan taught their 3-year-old son, James, to sit properly on a gentle pony. The boy's delighted laughter carried across the yard, mingling with the sounds of cattle lowing in the nearby pasture and chickens clucking in their coop. So much had changed since that fateful summer day when a lone marshal had appeared just in time to help her defend her home. The homestead had grown into a prosperous small ranch, with cattle grazing on the rich grassland and crops flourishing in the fertile soil near the creek. The cabin itself had been enlarged, with proper glass windows and a stone fireplace replacing the old iron stove. Nathan had received his permanent posting as territorial marshal, establishing an office in the growing town 10 miles away. His reputation for fairness and unwavering justice had spread throughout the territory, earning him respect from honest citizens and wariness from those who operated outside the law. They had married in the autumn following the confrontation with the railroad men, a simple ceremony attended by neighbors and a few of Nathan's fellow lawmen. Thomas Reed had given Fiona away in her father's absence, and his wife Eliza had helped sew the wedding dress that now lay carefully preserved in a cedar chest in their bedroom. James had arrived 2 years later, a robust boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's determined spirit. Now, watching him giggle as Nathan adjusted his tiny, had a miniature version of his father's, Fiona felt a contentment she had once thought beyond her reach. "Careful now," Nathan called as the boy gripped the saddle horn with chubby hands. "That's it, just like I showed you." Fiona smiled at the pride in her husband's voice. Despite his dangerous profession, Nathan had proven to be a gentle, patient father, determined to teach their son everything from writing to reading with equal enthusiasm. The sound of approaching horses drew Fiona's attention to the road. 2 riders approached at a leisurely pace: Thomas Reed and his oldest son, now a lanky teenager who had recently begun riding with the local marshal's posse as a deputy in training. "Visitors, Nathan," she called, descending the porch steps to greet them. Nathan lifted James from the pony, setting him on his shoulders as he joined Fiona. "Thomas, Daniel," he greeted as the riders dismounted. "What brings you out this way?" Reed removed his hat, wiping sweat from his brow in the summer heat. "Just passing by on our way back from town. Thought you might like to know railroads back." Fiona tensed, old fears resurfacing despite the years that had passed. "What do you mean?" "Not like before," Reed hastened to explain, noting her reaction. "They're negotiating properly this time, offering fair prices for right-of-way access across the northern sections of several properties, including yours." Nathan's arm slipped around Fiona's waist, a reassuring presence. "Official representatives?" "Yes, with proper papers and legal counsel," Reed confirmed. "Times are changing, Marshal. Even the railroads learning there are better ways to get what they want than forcing people off their land." Fiona exchanged a glance with Nathan, a silent communication born of years together. "We'll consider their offer," she said finally. "If it's fair and if they respect our boundaries." Reed nodded approvingly. "Thought you might say that. Progress is coming to the valley whether we like it or not. Best to have a hand in shaping it rather than just resisting." After the Reeds departed, Nathan set James down to resume his play with the patient pony. "What do you think?" he asked Fiona quietly. "About the railroad's offer?" Fiona considered the question, looking out over the land that had been the center of so much conflict and joy. "I think my father would understand that times change," she said slowly. "As long as we keep what matters most, we can afford to be generous with the rest." Nathan smiled, the expression crinkling the corners of his eyes where new lines had formed over the years, some from laughter, others from squinting into the sun during long rides enforcing the law across the territory. "You're a wise woman, Fiona Blackwood," he said, pulling her close for a quick kiss. "I married a wise man," she countered, resting her head against his chest for a moment. "Most of the time, anyway." Nathan's laugh rumbled beneath her ear. "Only most of the time?" "Well, you did once face down 11 armed men with just me and a rifle for backup," Fiona reminded him, looking up with a teasing smile. "Not sure that qualifies as wisdom." "Best foolish decision I ever made," Nathan replied, his expression growing serious despite his light tone. "Brought me everything that matters." As the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, casting long golden rays across their land, Fiona watched her husband return to their son's riding lesson. James's face lit up as Nathan adjusted his posture in the saddle, offering encouragement and gentle correction. 5 years ago, she had stood alone against forces that seemed insurmountable, determined to protect what was hers despite impossible odds. She'd gained more than just victory in that stand. She'd found a partner who understood that some things were worth fighting for, no matter how outnumbered you might be. And together, they had built something neither could have created alone: a home, a family, a future rooted in the land they had defended side by side. As Nathan looked up, catching her watching them, his smile was as warm as the day he'd first appeared when she needed him most. Fiona returned it, knowing with absolute certainty that regardless of what challenges tomorrow might bring, they would face them as they had faced everything else. Together.